Welcome, warriors of darkness and seekers of forbidden knowledge, to extreme metal philosophy. Today, we dive into the sinister depths of one of history's greatest crimes, the Christianization of Scandinavia. This is not just a story of religious conversion, but one of cultural destruction, deception, and the iron hand of the church crushing ancient traditions under the guise of salvation. Prepare yourselves as we journey into the shadows of a time when pagan rituals and Viking raids ruled the north, only to be swallowed by the Christian plague that has haunted our world ever since. The rise of the Catholic Church wasn't a triumph of faith, but a conquest of the soul, an act of brutality masquerading as mercy. Let's expose the lies that bind, and unveil the truth of how this vile system tried to erase the power and purity of the old ways. Viking Age, a world without the cross. Before Christianity seeped its poison into Scandinavia, the north was a place of unyielding spirit. A time ruled by the power of the Aesir, where gods like Odin and Thor reigned, and men followed their own will, guided by the strength of their swords and the wisdom of the runes. In the Viking Age, 750–1000 AD, society thrived without the weight of a cross hanging over their heads. The chieftains weren't just political leaders, they were the priests of their people, the keepers of the ancient pagan faith. Power wasn't centralized in the hands of one king or church. It was shared among the many, within communities bound by blood and battle. Yet, with the coming of Christianity, all of this was threatened. Just as extreme metal rebels against the chains of conformity today, the Old Norse religion was a defiant scream against the control of religious dogma. What the church brought to the north wasn't salvation, it was subjugation. It wasn't a peaceful transition, but a brutal takeover that echoes through the centuries in the defiant sounds of black metal, death metal, and the occult. Join me as we explore how the blood-soaked hands of the church turned Viking warriors into Christian pawns and erased the old gods from the lands they once ruled. Before Christianity's poison took root in the north, the Vikings were the undisputed masters of their world. From 750 to 1000 AD, the Norse gods, Odin, Thor, Freya, and Loki, guided the lives of these proud, pagan warriors. Their belief in an afterlife, spent in Valhalla, achieved through glory in battle, was central to their existence. It was an era when power was determined by might, wisdom, and honor. This ancient, oral society lived by their own rules, free from the hypocrisy of a church that preached salvation but brought only destruction. The gods of old did not demand obedience to a centralized authority, but instead respected personal strength and the sacred connection to the land. The chieftains were both leaders and priests, serving their people in matters of faith and war. The Viking raiders, feared across Europe, brought riches back to their homeland, strengthening their communities while remaining loyal to their own pagan faith. But then, slowly, the shadows began to gather. The cross crept into their lands, not with open arms, but through manipulation and violence, forcing the Northmen to bend to a new god, one who demanded submission. Just as black metal stands as a bastion against mainstream religion, the Viking culture was a flame of defiance against the Christian doctrine. But like all rebellions, it was eventually crushed, not by might, but by deceit. The death of the old gods, from sacred runes to crucifixes, the Christianization process wasn't just a matter of converting hearts, it was a deliberate campaign to erase an entire culture. The symbols of the old gods were defiled, replaced by the cross, and with it came a sweeping change in laws, culture, and life. The sacred runestones, once carved with the stories of great warriors and the favor of gods like Thor and Odin, were covered with Christian inscriptions. Yet, even in this forced submission, there was resistance. The church sought to rewrite the stories of the Vikings, but they couldn't fully erase the spirit of the old ways. In many cases, pagan and Christian symbols intertwined on these stones, proof that the old gods clung to life, even as the new religion tightened its grip. This blending of symbols was not an embrace of Christianity, but a form of rebellion, a refusal to let go of their ancestral gods. Even as the Christian faith claimed victory, it was a hollow one. The Norse gods lived on in secret, through the whispered prayers of those who still honored them, and through the culture itself, passed down in songs, stories, and yes, even in the very metal music we celebrate today. The church tried to conquer the north, but the spirit of rebellion and defiance, the same spirit we hear in the crushing riffs and unholy screams of extreme metal, could never truly be destroyed. The Christianization of violence, turning Vikings into crusaders. The Viking raids, once motivated by honor and survival, were twisted by the church into something far darker. With the cross came the justification for violence in the name of God. Before, Viking raids were driven by the quest for glory, for the halls of Valhalla, where the worthy dead would feast eternally with Odin. But once the church infected the north, it wasn't glory they sought, but obedience to a foreign god. Christianity repurposed the violence of the Viking Age into a tool for its own expansion. The warriors of the north, who once raided for their gods, were now crusaders, wielding their axes in the name of Christ. The church sanctioned these holy wars, blessing the bloodshed and turning what was once the proud Viking warrior spirit into an instrument of religious oppression. The Crusades were nothing more than the Viking raids under a different banner. With one crucial difference, these new raids served the interests of the church, not the people. The hypocrisy of the church, a reign of deceit and bloodshed. Christianity preaches peace, love, and forgiveness. But where was the love when Viking temples were burned? Where was the peace when priests blessed swords meant to slaughter those who refused to bow to the cross? The church claims to offer salvation, but its history is written in blood, and nowhere is that clearer than in its conquest of Scandinavia. The church claims to offer salvation, but what it truly brought was hypocrisy and bloodshed. While it preached peace, love, and mercy, it spread its influence through conquest, war, and torture. In the north, they razed pagan temples, slaughtered the priests of the old gods, and stole the wealth of the land to build their cathedrals and fill their coffers. This hypocrisy is something we see reflected in our modern world today. Just as extreme metal stands as a resistance against the commodification and sanitization of art, the Viking Age stood as a rebellion against the church's deceptive authority. The betrayal of kings, power and politics behind the cross. The Christianization of Scandinavia wasn't a grassroots movement, nor did it happen because the people suddenly found faith in a foreign god. No. It began as a betrayal from within, by kings and chieftains who craved power, wealth, and legitimacy under the church's rule. One such traitor was King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway, baptized not because of belief, but for political gain. After Olaf secured his throne, he wielded Christianity as a weapon against his own people, converting them by sword and flame. Those who refused to abandon the gods of their ancestors were tortured, exiled, or killed. Pagan temples were desecrated, their priests slaughtered, and the sacred symbols of the Norse gods were replaced with crosses. But why? Why would Viking kings, once powerful in their own right, bend the knee to a foreign faith? The answer lies in power, pure, unadulterated control. With the backing of the church, these kings solidified their rule, centralizing authority under the guise of divine right. Christianity gave them the means to unite previously decentralized tribes under a single ruler, which the church, ever hungry for influence, was all too eager to support. These kings became nothing more than pawns of the church, using their newfound religion to suppress opposition. The clergy formed a new, parasitic class, draining the lifeblood from the land and imposing their rules on a free people. In return, these kings were granted the illusion of power, while the real authority lay in the hands of bishops and priests. The church's reach grew long and cold, like a shadow over the north, choking out the old ways and replacing them with doctrines of obedience and fear. The church, like the institutions that exploit and dilute our music today, has always claimed to stand for righteousness while hiding its true agenda, power and control. They took the rich, spiritual, and complex religion of the Norse and reduced it to heathenism. They demonized the deeper and darker truths of the human experience. And just as extreme metal refuses to be tamed, the old gods refuse to go quietly. The old pagan ways confront that darkness, embrace it, and wield it as a source of strength. reclaiming the old ways, the eternal spirit of rebellion, but the fire of rebellion never truly dies. Just as Christianity rose on the bones of our pagan ancestors, so too does the spirit of defiance live on in the unholy trinity of occultism, black metal, and extreme music. For those who see through the lies of religious oppression, extreme metal offers an escape from the shackles of conformity, just as the old gods provided freedom from the tyranny of kings and priests. As we blast the sounds of darkness into the void, we honor the fallen gods and stand defiant against the forces of conformity. The time has come to reclaim the old ways. Let the fires of rebellion burn once more. Hail, the gods of old, and hail extreme metal. Stay strong, stay dark, and resist. This is the esoteric extreme metal philosophy, where darkness is power, and power is eternal. Subscribe now, and let the war against the cross continue.